Copper prices plunged today after the American president announced a new tariff on the metal, but excluded from the tariff refined products, which is most of what Canada sends to the U.S. For more on the impact, let's bring in Warwick Smith. He's the CEO of American Pacific Mining, a Canadian company. Warwick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me, Marilla. Appreciate it.
I know your operations are mainly in the U.S. We'll talk about your exposure in a moment. But this 50% markup sounds pretty dramatic, but it actually isn't dramatic when you drill down. Can you sort of explain what's covered, what isn't?
Yeah, happy to. So when this first came out, roughly 6 weeks ago, copper went up dramatically in the feeling that refined copper was going to be a part of these tariffs. We find out yesterday refined copper is not a part of these tariffs. This is Canada getting caught up in a bit of a China-US dispute. So let me explain. The US consumes 1.8 million tons of copper annually. They make 1.1 million tons domestically. So there's a shortfall there. Canada exports 334,000 tons to the US annually, which is roughly 52% of our total exports, about $4.9 billion. So the concern for Canadians is, okay, if they're paying a 50% tariff, the cost of copper is going to go up dramatically, which is what we saw in the price of copper. What we find out yesterday is that refined copper is not going to be a part of those tariffs. Okay, so why does that matter? When you're shipping copper, a company like ours, if we're in production, we take unrefined copper and typically we send it to China, because China has 16 smelters. The US only has 2 smelters, Canada only has 1. So China has lots of opportunity to take unrefined copper, refine it, and then ship it back. That's really the key here. What the US is basically trying to do is to fight China, and ultimately what they need to do, much like what Canada needs to do, is to build more smelters domestically.
And we know that will take a long time. So you mentioned Canada sends over 50% of its copper to the U.S., 52%. Would any of it be then included under the tariff? We know that there are things included under the tariff. I'm just wondering if even a small part of it could be hit.
Yeah, the vast bulk, 99%, is refined copper that heads down to the U.S. What they're really taxing here is things like actual copper pipe that's going to come down from China or from other places. Those are going to take the hit. They're going to take the 50% tariff. Trump is essentially doing exactly what he said he was going to do from the jump when he started running again. I'm going to put America first. I'm going to put domestic production back on the map. We're going to make things in the USA. This is exactly what he's doing here. He's taxing those things that are already made, but he's allowing the materials to come in so that they can then be made into what's needed in the United States.
Sorry to interrupt you.
It's not going to hurt us too much.
It's not going to hurt us too much, but let me talk to you about timing for a moment in the perspective of the U.S. As you mentioned, they don't have the ability to refine it. So having a tariff like this put in place immediately would be a problem if they don't have development in process to refine it.
Yeah, what they can do is take refined copper and make it into pipes at that point. So from that standpoint, they're okay. The concern was that this refined copper was going to have that 50% tariff. That's why you saw that price of copper go from $4.50 up above $5. And as soon as they announced that refined copper was not going to receive the tariff, in about 20 minutes, copper came down 19%. It's a big move down. Now, the belief from most of us in the industry is that copper will continue its rise, likely seeing a break in $5 again by the end of the year, simply because the world needs so much copper to drive forward. As we talk about things like net zero by 2050, if we're going to do that, the world has produced 700 million tons of copper in the last 3,000 years. To get to net zero by 2050, we need 1.4 billion tons in the next 25 years. So copper's got a very good future ahead of it in terms of price appreciation. But for today, this tariff talk has just thrown the markets into turmoil.
Yeah. Let's talk about your company specifically, because as I mentioned, your operations are focused in the U.S. So are you hit at all by this?
No, we're essentially not at this point. What's interesting for us, and from an American Pacific standpoint, so it's American Pacific, symbols USGD in Canada. We are a Canadian-based company, but all our assets are in the U.S. So we have an asset up in Alaska that combined is a 16.7 million ton VMS. that is around 3.5% copper equivalent. And then we've got a project down in Montana, which is a high-grade exploration gold copper project down there as well. What this does for a company like ours is it makes those assets significantly more valuable. The thesis of U.S. domestic supply and getting these projects into production has become a forefront for many people now. These projects are going to need to go into production domestically, both for Canada and for the U.S. We see the U.S. pounding on this point. And so those projects that we've had for a couple of years now are becoming much, much more valuable as all these tariffs are coming in and there's all this push to produce domestically within the U.S.
What is your output and what is your ability to ramp up your output capacity if in fact, this benefits you in the near term?
It does benefit us, although we're in the exploration and development portions right now. So, for example, up in Alaska, we were partnered with one of the largest smelters out of Japan. And the end of last year, we transacted with them where we owned 36% of the project. We ended up taking 100% of the project back after they'd spent roughly 114 million US on this project. Plus, they paid us $10 million US specifically so that they could purchase 50% of the zinc concentrate down the road at market prices. That gives you an idea of how desperate some of these smelters are for metals. They were so in tune with it, they wanted to make sure that they could get that zinc concentrate that they were willing to pay us quite aggressively, along with let us take full control of the project in order to be able to do that. So those are the types of deals and transactions that we look to do at this stage as we develop these projects and go forward.
Warwick, I do have to leave the conversation with you there. I'm out of time. Warwick Smith is the CEO of American Pacific Mining, a Canadian company. Thanks for your time today. Coming up, we're going to take a deeper dive into the Canadian GDP numbers for May and for June. That's coming up next.